Welcome back to Wine and Crime and our active cold case series, where we pop a bottle and pick apart some of the darkest and most baffling unsolved disappearances that still haunt investigators and families to this day. Today's case is devastating. But before we dive in, I want to give a verbal trigger warning. Today's case involves detailed accounts of child sexual abuse, grooming, rape, stalking, and the murder of a minor. It also includes disturbing testimony about body disposal. This episode may be especially difficult for some listeners. As always, please take care of yourselves and feel free to skip this one if needed. A 15-year-old girl sneaks out of her bedroom window and never comes back. Her disappearance sparks a decades-long search that would ultimately expose horrific abuse, lies, and the unthinkable. A killer who may have hidden her body in the bottom of the Thames River. This is the story of April Dawn Pennington, missing from Montville, Connecticut, since 1996. 15-year-old April Pennington lived with her family in a quiet neighborhood on Orchard Drive, just outside Uncasville. It was a normal school night, or so it seemed. But by 5:30 a.m., her mother was waking up to a mother's worst nightmare. April's bed was empty, the window open, and one of her stuffed animals was tucked into the sheets, almost like she was trying to cover for her absence. And she'd done it before, snuck out, hung out with friends, and made it back before morning, but this time, she was gone. Investigators quickly learned that April had been picked up that night by two people, a 15-year-old classmate named Patrick, and a 30-year-old man named George. Let me say that again. A 30-year-old man was routinely hanging out with teenagers. George was a lobster fisherman with a long and terrifying history of sexual abuse, and at the time, he was actually awaiting trial for raping a 13-year-old girl. Somehow this man was still roaming free and preying on kids like April. According to Patrick, the three went into the woods behind the Mohegan School, drank beer, smoked weed. Then things got much darker. He first said they had consensual sex, but later his story changed. He said he and George raped April, and George had planned to kill her all along. And the details only get worse from there. Patrick claimed George told him he was part of a cult and needed a body for the altar. He said April pretended not to be upset, probably terrified. Patrick said he was dropped off and George drove off with April. That was the last time anyone ever saw her. Later, George allegedly bragged to Patrick that he'd strangled April and dumped her body in a lobster trap, sinking it in the River Thames. George told police he didn't even know April, but records showed he had called her house 5 times the day she vanished. He also lied about knowing Patrick, even though they were longtime friends. April's mother never believed she ran away. There was $950 in cash for rent untouched. April left behind her purse, her backpack, everything. She'd snuck out before, yes, but she always came home. In 1999, a family friend named James Butler claimed he saw April at a Blockbuster in Virginia Beach. He said she looked strung out and had a toddler with her. But Butler had a traumatic brain injury and later recanted. Investigators discounted the sighting entirely. In 2008, George was finally charged with capital murder, kidnapping and rape. By then, he was already serving time for molesting a teenage boy. Patrick struck a deal. He couldn't be prosecuted for raping April due to the statute of limitations, so he testified against George to reduce his own sentence for another sexual assault. His testimony was chilling. He said George described the murder in detail, claiming April's remains were eaten by crabs after he dumped her body. 3 jailhouse informants and George's ex-wife testified. One said he dismembered the body and put the parts in lobster pots. In March 2010, George was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life without parole, but in 2016, the conviction was overturned on appeal. Thankfully, in 2020, a higher court reinstated the conviction. George will never walk free again. April had struggles like any teen. She'd started getting bad grades, experimented with marijuana, and cut herself twice. But her parents and friends say she wasn't in serious trouble. She was a typical teen going through a rough patch. She didn't want to move to New Jersey, where her Navy dad had been reassigned. She'd just broken up with a boyfriend. She was emotional, sure, but still connected to her family. Her disappearance wasn't a runaway. It was a kidnapping, a rape, and a murder. And still, her body has never been found.